But this next panel is all about having that team, those people that you can call, the lawyers, the accountants, the agents, the representatives, the community around the creatives, to have those people on tap when you need to turn a crisis into an opportunity or a wall into a window is not just professionally very important, but personally very, very satisfying. I do not need to impress upon you how important it is to have a good team around you, especially in these times. So do yourself a favor and make friends with those of us who seem boring, because we will provide you a lot of comfort during those hard times. So on that note, it is my fantastic pleasure to introduce to you someone who has been on my personal board of trusted advisors since we met on our first day of law school 13 years ago at an iftar. She's a fantastic attorney, consultant. She knows so much about so many industries and brings that wealth and depth of experience to entertainment. Please join me in welcoming the wonderful Fatima Hassan Ali.
Thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to be moderating this session today. It's on relationships and the business behind the business. And so I've got this rock star panel here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. Amin Al-Sarraf, he's an entertainment lawyer at Troutman Pepper Locke. Next to him is Najib Kouda, who is the CEO and co-founder of Endless Media, which was recently acquired by Zero Gravity Management. Next to Najib, we have Hamza Ali, who is the president of MPI Media Group and the co-founder of Watermelon Pictures. And at the end, we have Ali Ben Mohammed, who is a talent agent at UTA. So welcome. So my vision for this panel today is to equip all the future media executives in this room with what they need to know. And we are so lucky to be joined by current media executives and advisors. It's not an easy business, and one thing I've learned is that who you know is just as important as what you know, and also who your community of advisors will be when you need to lean on people to give you different pieces of advice and encouragement. So this panel is going to dive into relationship building, legal considerations, and some of the financial aspects that I think people in this room are dying to know. So I guess just to kind of understand who's in the room, who here is interested in the business behind the media as a career? Okay, so don't hesitate to come up to these people after the fact. I'm a lawyer, so I have my questions. So this first question is for the entire panel. I'm just going to throw it out there. The entertainment, like I just said, the entertainment industry is just as much about relationships as about creativity. How do you navigate building trust and managing, or maintaining rather, ethical practice in this business where sometimes personal relationships and personal pressure points can overlap with the professional obligations?
I'll take that one.
Yeah?
Feels like
Okay.
an easy question. I think it starts with getting to know your client and your artist, and along the way, building relationships with allies. That's sort of my formula. You know, I not every artist is for every executive. I tend to be very picky. I like to create a bit of a market, and you know, it's about having that intimate relationship with your artist, and then from there, it's, you know, finding like-minded individuals who will, you know, be part of that journey. And once we figure that out, then we can start being a bit more strategic and, you know, laying a path for the artist.
Yeah.
First, I just want to say thank you to MPAC and Doris Duke, Elise, Lubna, Sue, Zeba. This is a huge blessing, and we don't take it for granted. No, but lack of trust is a huge issue in our industry specifically, and it's really for good reason. We've been talking to hundreds of filmmakers over the past year, and many of them have active licenses with distributors, and they've received zero reporting for years. So, I really could only speak for ourselves at Watermelon. Like, we're very community driven. Our filmmakers are like, they become family once they sign with us. Rashid Mashadawi, the director of From Ground Zero, he literally called me the morning that we didn't get the nomination to say thank you, for all the hard work, and like we're like exchanging, like love back and forth. So, again, the industry does have this problem, but you have to like Ali said, you have to vet your clients. But yeah, we're our filmmakers from Vin, Mohammed Jabali, Mahdi Fleifel, they literally become like our brothers when they sign with us. So filmmakers that entrust their films with us, we really try to do right by them.
I think everything really comes down to being able to build a two-way street with the people that you're working with. I think you always are trying to find people who are going to put in as much energy and effort into the work as you are. And that's usually where you're going to find the most meaningful relationships. Because I think this industry it's difficult. It's really hard to get things made. It's even harder to make the project successful after you get things made. It's a long haul. Things don't usually happen quickly. It usually takes a lot of patience and a lot of time. So you really have to find people who are going to be in the trenches with you, people that you build a rapport with, you can really trust, and you're going to get to the end result. Because I think the other part of this industry that, sometimes is the dark side of it is that as much as we all care about the stories that we're trying to tell, as much as we all want to do the work correctly, there are dark cesspools of money out there that people will tap into to get projects made. There's a lot of times people will cut corners just to get to the finish line, and those things are easy traps to fall into when you become incredibly passionate about what you're trying to make. I mean, I've fallen into those traps myself. Sometimes it'll be 3-4 years that I've been working on a project, and sometimes you get to the end of a road and you're like, I just got to do what I got to do to get it made. And then you start working with people who aren't maybe the most ethical human beings in the world, because you start trying to figure out, how do I just get this project done? How do I make it? I believe in it. I need to get to the end. And so it's sometimes also censoring yourself to kind of realize, like, how do I balance my passion with people who can get it done, but get it done correctly?
Yeah, I'll speak to it from sort of both sides of the coin. As an attorney, I represent both companies and I represent talent, artists, and those folks. And what I see is, obviously this industry is built on relationships. That's the driving force of this industry is relationships. But relationships are incredibly personality driven, incredibly, they can be fraught, those sorts of things. At the end of the day, this is a business, and most people are in it for their interests and what they want. And for a while, those interests are aligned. If you're working with a creative partner, or you're working with a manager, you're working with a production company, however those relationships are, they may be aligned, but there may come a time when they start splitting. And so what I find is that having those hard conversations up front is incredibly important. Making sure that, and this is not necessarily a plug for all the lawyers in the room, but it really is an important, I think, piece of advice, which is get a lawyer involved early on. If you're involved in a project, make sure it's papered properly, make sure there's the right things to protect you, all of those things on both sides, right? And in your engagement of a professional, right? If you're engaging, a manager, for example, like I've had story after story of, I had a client a couple years ago come to me and say, I've been working with my manager for 15 years. She's like a sister to me. We share so many things personally, and she's been so great for me. And I just found out that she's been taking, 25% when we agreed on 15. And so I asked, did you guys have an agreement? Did you, have you been checking up on the books? All those? No. It was just trust. So sometimes, and I don't mean to be the sort of like negative Nelly here, but I think that this is incredibly important. Trust is something that you should be very guarded about who you place it in.
Right, and reputation is everything, and so you want to defend that to the utmost of your ability, and that means following through on any commitments you make, and maybe not talking badly about other people, because word gets around. Hamza, as the co-founder of Watermelon Pictures, you've been instrumental in bringing projects like From Ground Zero to over 150 screens across the country. As a distributor, could you share some insight into what you're looking for in a film? And, what is something that you're looking for that maybe others may not be?
We're really looking to thread the needle between activism and entertainment. And I think one trap sometimes we tend to fall into is trying to undo all the propaganda that's been made against us in a single film. And also being limited by any oppression that's happened to us. So we really want like big ideas, fun, exciting hooks, appealing to broad audiences. And sometimes a question we pose to our filmmakers is, what is the right medium for the message you're trying to convey? Is it a film, or is it a book, or a news article, or a podcast? So and that's not to say we don't want to be political or have a political backbone in our content, but more so that sometimes by just we could have more political impact by creating more entertaining content. So I think that's the main thing to convey, is that appeal to mass audience, make an entertaining film first, and then the rest will come naturally.
Excellent. I think, Najib, you had some thoughts on that too, right? In terms of understanding that great movies are ones that people want to see.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it always comes down to understanding, like, there's always a balance between art and commerce in our business. And it's always, sometimes that balance is easy to find, sometimes that balance is extremely difficult to find. But we also kind of have to have realistic interpretations of what our industry is, which is making a movie, for the most part, is not cheap. Releasing a movie is not cheap. And there is real money and real people involved in those projects many, many times, especially when you're talking about independent projects that might be private equity financed, and you're talking about human beings' money that you're entrusted with to make sure there's actually a path to recoupment. And we all know that this industry has gone through a whole lot in the past couple of years, and that path to profitability has only gotten more difficult as the industry has changed. And so now it really becomes our obligation on every project. As a producer, I've done this, and as a lit manager, I've done this with every artist that I've worked with, to understand, as much as we want to tell a story that feels meaningful to us, we also have to figure out how we're going to do right by the people who entrusted their investment to us to get to the end of the finish line and everyone has a good experience. Because I always say that obviously the greatest experience you can have in a film is you make exactly the movie you want to make and everyone makes money. And sometimes I know that sounds like the two most diametrically opposed ideas in the world when you're talking about something that is meaningful, but it's not. A lot of times those two things can be combined, and that is the best situation, that an investor wants to work with you again and says, that was a great experience. I got my money back. You made a great movie. We all had a great experience. Let's do it again. And that's how you go from being a one-time producer to building a real business where you're consistently making projects and you're building a real career out of this. And that's obviously, I think, what we all want to do, is how do you turn storytelling into a lifelong career that is profitable and meaningful to you?
Thank you. Ali, in your role as a talent agent at UTA, you've represented a diverse roster of clients. I'll take a moment here to just say, I didn't read these folks' bios, but I encourage you to look at that on the website. I didn't give you your flowers, but each of you is so impressive. Ali, how do you approach negotiating contracts to balance the creative aspirations of your clients with the financial and the legal realities of this industry?
I asked for double. Just double. No.
Yes. I hire you.
It's the toughest and most intimate portion of the relationship, because, on one hand, you want as much control and you want to participate in the upside, but someone's giving you money. So there's a bit of a push and pull. You're hoping that your client is at a stage where you can leverage and get both the upside and the money, but sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. So you just have to be honest with your client and just lay it out for them. And ultimately, they'll figure out which direction they want to go to. And so the biggest thing is transparency. And I think sometimes, there are moments where you get an incredible check and you can go make a show for a network and get paid 7 figures, 8 figures, or you go to a smaller cable channel and you retain control, and that, perhaps is the best path. But ultimately, you have, as the artist, you're making the decision. I'm informing you the paths, and it's up to you ultimately. But, ideally, I want somebody to have creative control. I want them to participate on the upside, and until you get to a certain level, it's not very lucrative, but in the long run, it tends to be. So,
Amazing. For aspiring talent and professionals, that are trying to break into Hollywood, Adi, the path often feels daunting. And so from your perch, what advice would you give to young creatives and professionals, especially from Muslim or underrepresented communities?
As an artist, just work on your art. I hate to sound like Rick Rubin, but you kind of just have to live in it, because at a certain point, there's a level of sensitivity that you build, that you start to sense, and hopefully the thing that compels you to create that piece of art speaks to other people. And I think the only way you'll get to that point where your art and your level of sensitivity reaches a broader audience is by doing the art. There's no magic bullet. I don't have the magic bullet. My magic bullet, when I understand the artist, is to be able to convey their art to buyers, to studio heads, so that they understand who the artist is. But unless you know who you are, I don't know who you are. And so I would just urge you to work on your art. And here's the reality, you work on your art, you find that rhythm, and then some guy like me is gonna call you or track you down, or, that's our job, is to find artists. So, sending out emails, I always feel it's just a waste of time. Just work on that thing. You have iPhones, you can shoot stuff. It's so much easier than it's ever been. And then for executives, just watch stuff, read stuff, have a point of view. It's like time on platform. The longer you're on it, the more likely you're going to develop taste, the more likely you're going to meet people, and there's a little bit of luck, and hopefully all that stuff comes together, and you're sitting here.
Yes. You're the head of Troutman Pepper Locke's Entertainment Industry Group. You've been involved in various complex litigation and strategic matters within the entertainment sector. Could you give the audience some insight into some common legal challenges entertainment professionals are facing today and how they can proactively address them?
Sure, I'll answer the second part with the very easy one. Consult your lawyer. That's how you can proactively address issues. But the industry is going through a lot of changes, and it's a constant. There are always things that are developing. The things that are kind of key areas to be aware of are some of the things that are the least sexy, right? Employment, for example, employment issues. If you're a production company, if you've got a television show, a movie, or whatever that you're producing, make sure that you're doing the right things in terms of how you're paying the people who are working on your project, how you're papering, how you're characterizing them. Are they independent contractors? Are they employees? Those are the kinds of things that can trip you up and can result in you getting involved in a litigation that's going to distract you from the work that you're doing, and that's going to be expensive, and that's going to be, a headache, and maybe potentially might impact your reputation, right? So these things are all kind of cascading issues that can come up from, a core that can be resolvable, can be addressed pretty easily. So that's one. Intellectual property is always something, especially now with AI, and how are you characterizing? Are you protecting your intellectual property properly? Wherever you are on the spectrum of a creative project, what is your intellectual property? What is your interest? Have you copyrighted it? Have you, protected it? And then, are you using other people's intellectual property, and are you doing that in a way that's correct and that is allowed? That you do have the license? Those sorts of things are also areas where you could easily get tripped up. And as a litigator, the litigation portion of my practice is I usually tell people, and I was just telling this to somebody else, I usually tell people, I hope we never have to talk, because I hope you don't get involved in litigation. But if you do, obviously, let's have a discussion. But I think there's also maybe not as much of an understanding of what that means, what litigation can mean for you. And it is a very expensive process. It's a very time-consuming process. It's a very distracting process. And when you get into a dispute, I think there can be sometimes a very strong, like, I'm going to pound my fist on the table, and if you don't say yes to me, then we're just going to go to court. And it's not that simple. I mean, we're in an entertainment environment right now, and yes, if you watch a television show, you can go from having a phone call like that to being in court in the same day. That's not how it works. This is a years-long process. This is it's a very involved process. And that gets back to the other point, which is about, contracts. I've been involved in situations where a deal is done literally on a napkin. You've got the contours of a deal or a sheet of paper, and it's like one page. And you don't have all the things that you want to put in a contract. And so then inevitably, you trusted this person, you trusted that this was going to go properly. You all, you had the great dinners and the great, experiences with each other. In fact, you may have even gone through the creative process and gone through all that. But then inevitably at some point, there's some dispute, and there isn't something in writing saying this is how we're going to resolve this dispute, or this is who's right and who's wrong, or where the money's going to be paid, or whatnot. And then you get into a lawsuit, and you don't have any, you can just, I thought this is what we were agreeing on. And then the other person says, well, I thought this is what we were agreeing on. And there is no easy answer to how to resolve that. And usually everybody loses and the lawyers win.
Right.
So.
And $30,000 today may seem like a lot of money, but trust me, you don't want to be on the hook for $1.5 million in a couple of years. That will destroy you. So think of it as an investment and as a way to protect yourself in terms of talking to lawyers and getting their guidance.
Can I just add real quick? I mean, every time I've closed a deal, every time, there is some sneaky language in the contract which you didn't agree to, every time. So even at the highest level, they will weasel some sort of language, precedent, whatever. And that's where it gets really sticky because, making a deal is just mostly diplomatic, right? We've agreed that we want to work together. The attorney, the business affairs attorney his job is just to not screw it up. So he's not going to get into the nitty gritty until, I go, hey, here's the attorney. Send the long form over. And then, we get on the call and you're just like, I didn't agree to any of this stuff. And so it happens all the time.
Yeah.
I'll just add, the back of the napkin story is like $100 million project. This was not a
for sure.
tiny thing. It happens at every level.
Right, and in the oil and gas industry, it happens too. Billions of dollars. I'm shocked. But I guess some pro tips when you are reaching out to your lawyer, have your questions stacked and don't, and email them exactly what you're asking and what you're looking for. That will save you some legal bills. Najib and Hamza, here's a question for you. What advantages do smaller companies have in today's industry, and how can they leverage those advantages in order to thrive?
Sure. I think it's mostly being nimble. When you're not under a studio pod deal, or you don't have a slate deal with a big financier that has a certain amount of films you have to make under certain criteria, it lets you pivot, it lets you move around, it lets you, it's the risk reward of it all, though. At the same time, you have less certainty behind what you're doing, but it lets you try different models, try different methods, and really kind of keep the onus on you and what you're trying to accomplish, which for the most times, it can be very beneficial when that goes well. Sometimes it can be a disaster when things don't go well. But that's kind of the push and pull of it all, is that you can move in different spaces and try different things. Because I think especially when we're talking about future films in particular, at a certain budget level, or at least under a certain budget level, there are a multitude of different ways to make movies. As long as you're not trying to make a $150 million tentpole, which pretty much you have to work with the same 6 people who exist who can actually finance a movie at that level. If you're operating under a reasonable budget level, you have options. And if you're not under a strict deal that makes you have to only use one model, you can try different things. You can try different kinds of co-financing agreements. You can do negative pickups. You can try different ways to make movies happen, which I think, especially when you're talking about films that might feel more risky and might involve different components that are a little bit more uncertain, a first-time filmmaker, a new writer, a little bit of a touchy subject matter, that lets you have options on the table to try different ways to put the puzzle pieces together.
You stole my answer, Najib. No, but sadly, like with what we're doing at Watermelon, we really don't have competition. And I say this like truthfully speaking, we really hope that that happens because that'll mean we're succeeding. But our strategic conversations are really not framed around surpassing competition. It's more about creating industry and creating space for our community to succeed. We have I don't know how many Muslims in America, and nobody is targeting us with their content. So, I think it's, unfortunately there's a cowardice in the industry, as we all know. And we really do hope to see the day that we're, having to compete to release these films.
Inshallah soon.
Inshallah.
Can you share an example of how you've helped clients navigate around an ethical or legal dilemma while preserving their creative integrity?
Sure. So you pointed out something earlier, which I think is really key, which is reputation is important. It's everything in the industry, and in your career. And so part of my practice is also crisis management and sort of avoiding litigation, avoiding situations where something might get public that may not be great for your reputation. And by the way, that's for things that are true and not true, because at this point it really doesn't matter. If things are true, if it gets out there, that's your reputation. It's going to impact it one way or the other. So I had a client come to me a few years ago, a client with a high profile and a strong sort of wholesome reputation. This is a person that many people know, and many people know them as a very kind of, good person, good, family person, that sort of thing. And they got an extortion demand, because that's the nature of what happens when attention is brought to you and you're high profile and people know how much you're making on a project, and, you get a target on your back. So extortion demand came in. They asked for an astronomical 8-figure demand, or else they would go to court and go to the press, et cetera, et cetera. So given the circumstances of this and how kind of outrageous the accusation was, and this is not always the right answer, but the advice in that situation was, let's do what we can to sort of prepare for a potential fight, lay the groundwork, do what we can to sort of make sure that things did not go viral, so to speak, if there was a leak of this story, and to call their bluff. And the reason I'm not telling you who it is because that was successful in terms of keeping it out of the press. It did not avoid litigation. We ended up in a litigation situation, but we resolved the case, sort of putting the right pressure in the right places to ultimately get a resolution that was a fraction of what they demanded. But the lesson is, twofold. Number one is, make sure that you're, in terms of trust, also making sure that your inner circle are people who you can trust. And unfortunately, the higher your profile, the smaller that circle can get. Right. And there are people that are out there, I want to be your best friend, I want to do that, I think you're great, the sycophantic approach, is very satisfying for an ego.
Right.
So it's easy to let those people in. But the other part of it is, also just be prepared and have the right team in place so that if something like this does happen, you can act on it quickly.
Mm-hmm. And so was that ultimately resolved in arbitration? Is that what
we settled the case. We settled the matter, and avoided publicity to it and avoided all of that and got rid of the litigation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think sometimes people think they can just go to the courthouse and file a lawsuit, and that may not always be what's allowed, and given the terms of your contract. It may be that you're forced into arbitration. So that's another reason to hire good counsel who can give you advice on the front end.
Yeah. The arbitration trial, like court discussion, is a whole other discussion that
For
we
sure.
can have. But that's a good point. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, let's do a bit of a lightning round to create some momentum. Adi, you talked about it's important to know, it's important to read, it's important to listen to things. And so I'm curious, what book are you reading right now? Or what show are you watching right now? And this is a lightning round, so I'm going to
This
go
is
down
so bad. I'm watching Squid Game. I'm not gonna lie. That's what I'm watching.
That's better than me. I have 4 kids, so I'm watching Bluey, Peppa Pig, and Miss Rachel.
We love Miss Rachel.
Down for Miss Rachel.
Yes.
Started watching the new season of Severance like everyone else, so that's the new thing.
I've got 3 kids too, and so we're reading the kids' books, and I have to say it's kind of the golden age of children's books these days. There's some really cool stuff out there, and I'll plug one that I found recently. I haven't read it yet, but it sounds like it's going to be really cool, called Siti the Scientist. Have you guys heard about this one?
Oh.
It's about a Palestinian, it's sort of science and through a Palestinian woman's experience, grandmother's experience. So I hope it's good.
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to be heading into our final set of questions, so I ask you guys in the audience to start thinking of questions. A bit of a serious question. So Hollywood has a profound impact in shaping public perceptions and cultural narratives. This has been a very difficult time for many of us in this community, and I would say also our friends and allies who are watching and don't know how to be helpful and how to show up. What should people who care about us, care about our adjacent communities, know about Hollywood today in terms of the political and cultural tides? And if you want to, what has been most revealing to you as you've been navigating this last year and a half?
I could jump in. We're very much in the belly of the beast in the industry. And if I could just give a small message of hope, it really does feel like the tides are turning. The conversations are changing. We're finally, speaking our piece. I think we're going to have a wave of, Arab, Muslim, Desi cinema that was, very similar to East Asia. So it's going to take all of us kind of uniting together, pooling our resources. But I've never been so optimistic. So.
It's the thing I think about all the time, because a lot of my clients who are Muslim have done things that are been disruptive, and Shireen's movie premiered on Saturday night, and it's just about trying to strip away the political aspect of it and really focusing on the humanity. I was thinking about when Tahar Rahim did The Mauritanian. He'd never wanted to play a terrorist, right? He was just like, after he'd done The Prophet, the thing that he was offered was to be one of the terrorists in Zero Dark 30. And for him, it was just so demoralizing. He was like, I don't want to work in Hollywood. And so when I started working with him, we just, our goal was to change the narrative. So, it's just about, if we can convey to humanity and who we are, there's a likelihood that we form a connection with people who don't know us. And so, dealing with some of the material that we go out with that we hope, captures a wide audience, it's the thing that, I constantly have to remind myself, that, America's made up of 2/3 white people, And so that formula, we're still figuring it out, but I think that there's so many incredible artists, so many incredible executives that are figuring it out and that are making it, digestible for a wider audience. And ultimately, that's all we can hope for. I got in this business because I was a victim of a hate crime at 7 years old. I grew up in Paris. My parents left France and came to America, and I wanted to just understand why people didn't like me. Like, I was 7 years old. I didn't, there's nothing, threatening about me, but I wanted to understand. And the thing is, media is messaging. And so for me, it was just like, look, the Rick Rubin thing is, I love, I studied his book. He has a level of sensitivity to humanity that enables him to take artists to a next level. And so for me, it was just to understand the storytelling mechanism, understand why people consume things, and why things become viral, why they become disruptive, and be able to help some of my artists, maybe think of certain feelings, think of certain moments that enabled their piece to be widely consumed. But it's the thing that I think about all the time. It's how do we touch people? And so it's not easy, and it's the thing that keeps me up at night, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing about our industry. Like, I think there are a couple of things I'm pretty sure about our business. Number one, I think, at least in my experience, I've always found the industry filled with more people who generally want to push the business forward as opposed to holding it back. I don't think I've almost ever come across an exec or a gatekeeper who's like, I have no interest in telling stories from Muslim creators, or I have no interest in telling stories from diverse creators. It's always been, I want to do that, but it's tough because our business is still archaic and it's hard to do. But it's not for a lack of desire. It's more of a business hold up on it. The second, I think, is this business is also one that loves to copy success stories. It's the age-old thing about Hollywood. Every year we always see, when you ever ask somebody, what's your mandate for the year? What are you guys looking for? The thing that they'll do is they'll list off like 5 success stories over the past 5 years and say, we want to do that because it worked. And then the third thing is the easiest thing to get people to start changing those examples of success stories is to be a success story. It's the easiest way to get Hollywood to pay attention or change or push the narrative forward is, it doesn't sound like the most glamorous thing in the world in this festival of artists, but make a lot of money. Like, that sounds like really bad, but it's the truth. It's like whenever these films become incredibly successful, people will want to make more of them because that's the nature of our business. No one wants to make something until it comes out and it becomes heavily successful. I mean, we saw it the past 10 years of every person, whenever you ask, what do you want to do in the horror space? And they're like, we want to make Get Out. And when Get Out went around town, everyone passed on it because they're like, we don't want to make Get Out. And now suddenly everyone does. And that's, I think, for us, as everyone on the stage and everyone in this room is who's trying to push these types of stories together, we just have to find ways to make them as successful as we can to tell the stories that we want to do. And then I promise you, everyone's going to want to copy those success stories. And next year or the year after, whenever it is that hit movie comes out from a Muslim writer-director, everyone's going to be like, yeah, we want that too. We want more of those.
Yeah, I'll build on that because I think, it's been a challenging year just from everything that we're being inundated with and understanding kind of the way the industry works and some of the things that are happening and some of the things that are spoken and unspoken and that sort of thing. But I think as a community, if there's a silver lining to it, it's galvanized, I think, a lot of us to connect with each other, to be with each other, to help each other, to work with each other. And I think the success of each of us individually is going to be the success of our narratives and our community and our impact going forward. And so I think, that I've met people that I've been in the industry for 15 or plus years, and there are people that I don't know, a lot of them. And it's great. And I think we're each sort of building on that. And the more that we can continue to do that, the more that I think we'll move forward, the industry will move forward, we'll each be, fulfilled, satisfied, and contributing to something that's greater.
The other thing that gives me hope is that we're a quarter of the population. We equate to about $2.8 trillion in spending power. So, if we support one another, we create our own market, and that's the hope. So.
Exactly. I would love y'all's take, if you've got one. And just to be provocative here, any bold predictions about what's coming for this industry? It can be from any kind of perspective, but financing, representation, new forms of storytelling.
I'll jump in.
Someone say AI, and then let's just.
Yeah.
No, I think I started to touch on it a little earlier. I do think there's going to be a wave of Muslim cinema, and there's been some taboo about going into the art the art industry, and I think that's kind of falling down. So I'm really excited that unfortunately it's built on a lot of what's happened, but we're really excited by the future, and I do believe that we're going to see our own wave similar to the Black movement had it, East Asia, and I think it's our time.
You're here. Thank you, everyone, for your comments here today. I'd like to open it up to the audience if anyone has questions.
My question is, we've seen so many creative panels, and like this business panel I think is so great. And there's so many people here who are trying to do the same thing around representation and uplifting our voices and creating these Netflixes for us and things of that sort. If you guys had like a magic wand, what are the missing things that maybe some of the people in this room could work on that would help you guys or help everyone here from a business perspective, like a 50-year strategy plan or something like that? What would be a few key things that we need to do to kind of all get on the same page from a really moving this forward?
I think we really need to quantify our spending power. I think that when you're in these C-level suites, they don't, like some young executive will walk in there and just say, "Did you know there are 2 billion Muslims?" And they'll be like, "No, let me check Wikipedia," And so we need to be able to quantify it. So when you walk in a room, you're like, 2 billion, oh, their spending power is, $2.8 trillion, by an estimate. But $2.8 trillion, someone's saying, well, we want some of that. Once that starts happening, it's funny how everything just sort of changes and there's an openness to it. I mean, ultimately, it's a business. And we're a quarter of the population. To me, during Ramadan, it's very telling that there are no halal options. That's crazy to me. And so until that changes, I don't know, it's a lot harder to make headway, and I think in the bigger sense. I think that, there are smart people who are figuring out how to convey that messaging, but I think it's important. I think people forget that we're 2 billion. I think once they realize that, I think sky's the limit for us.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always say to every artist that I work with is not to treat anything in this business as a binary decision, that it's just a yes or a no. I always say ask questions. Like whenever an executive comes back and says, I can't do it, it's like ask the question, why not? What happened here? And then ask the follow-up question, what can I do to make this more marketable? What can I give you so you can help me? And I've always found most of the projects that I've always been the most successful getting set up at big studios or small companies, wherever it is, it always started with that question of a lot of times having a conversation with an exec saying like, listen, like I think the value is X, but I really need the value to be Y. And what's the gap? What do I need to put in there to get us there so I can tell the story I want to tell, but makes it okay for you? Because we always have to also understand that the people that we sometimes vilify as like the gatekeepers and the execs or, the big bad people who are stopping you from telling you art, they're just people who want to keep their jobs. They don't want to get fired. They don't want to make a mistake and greenlight a movie that's going to lose a ton of money and then they lose their jobs. No one wants that. And so it's always about having that kind of two-way street to say like, well, how can I help you? And then you can help me. And then we can both make something amazing. And I don't think that means you necessarily have to have an in-depth understanding of all the business mechanics behind it. And honestly, most of the people in Hollywood also don't. So you just kind of have to understand the bits and pieces that allow you to put your project in the position that we all feel really good going into it before cameras start rolling.
Yeah, she's gonna.
Thank you. This is less so a question, just a comment. It's, you often feel alone in many of these rooms and spaces and fighting the good fight for representation. I find myself as a black Muslim woman often, the only one. So I'm always fighting. And so I just want to say thank you for these insights. And I'm so encouraged to know that you are all in your respective lanes. And I look forward to someday working with you, one of you or all of you. So thank you.
Salam. I don't know if this was covered already, but you guys kind of spoke about like $100 million deal that kind of went wrong, or like, these bigger deals. Inshallah, none of us go through that, but I know that like a lot of people when they're starting in freelance or they're starting in the business, they don't take into account accounting, and that ends up being a big legal issue. What are the most common legal or non-legal issues that hinder a project or someone who's starting out in the space?
Yeah, I mean, accounting. What are the priorities in any project or any sort of endeavor? It's money, it's rights, and it's and at the end then sort of related to all that is the relationships, right? Because those are key to all of these. So making sure that whatever project you're working on, you have a clear understanding, and ideally in writing, ideally, something that you've had somebody else take a look at to make sure it, protects you, somebody who's got your interests in mind. Because I've seen a lot of situations where you've got people who are sort of on an independent freelance sort of scenario, and they go to a production company and they say, let's get this deal going, and the production company says, no worries, all our lawyers will look at it and we'll give it to you and then you can sign it. And that sounds great because it sounds like a lawyer is looking at it, but that's not your lawyer. That's not a lawyer that's got your interests in mind. So it's important that you have somebody on your side. And look, it's hard. Lawyers can be expensive, but there are lawyers out there who there are lawyers that you can go to that provide pro bono services. There are lawyers who can get into flexible fee arrangements. They're out there. What I would say is talk to a lawyer and start kind of navigating what that looks like and find a lawyer that works for you. So, if somebody calls me and says, I've got this issue and it's not something that I think makes sense for me to handle, I know, 2 or 3 other people that I can refer them to or more that might work better. But, you made the call to the person that and then you get connected and sort of start navigating that. And then, when it comes to intellectual property, it's such a big issue because you could easily, I dealt with a situation recently where 2 cousins were making a film together, a documentary film, very impactful, very cool. And through a family breakdown in whatever, they now have a situation where they can't produce the movie. They've got it filmed, they've got it packaged, but one of the cousins can't get the literal film from the other one because he won't talk to him. Right? So, and they thought, we don't need a lawyer. Like, one of them is a lawyer, the one who's got it. But they thought we don't need anything in writing, right? And so he comes to me, and I'm there's not much you can do. They've got a 50-50. There's so as much as it might be uncomfortable up front to have those sort of like hey, can we get I need my lawyer to look at it, and that sounds like a little standoffish. It sounds like okay, maybe I don't trust you. It saves a lot of headache in the long run, and it's really important.
In terms of accounting, I mean, it just.
Like pitfalls or people they don't pay attention.
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that?
Sorry, just in the non-legal sense, like just some stuff that comes up that you see happen very common in the space where it's like someone has a project and something hinders it. There's a pitfall, but it's not legal. It's just like it could be relationships or anything. Like that.
It's every day. So they're relationships, and so everyone's doing a job. There's an understanding. It gets tricky when when you're developing a piece of art. So you deal with this all the time. I mean, a filmmaker will turn in a cut of something he's working on that's very special to him, and then someone will give him notes, And those notes, usually I like to get in the middle of the notes because I can maybe say that's probably not a good note. But if the person's been doing it for 20 years, I'm not going to, and they don't want to take my counsel. They just go to the filmmaker, and the filmmaker hates the notes and now wants to just essentially buy back his movie. So there's always going to be an issue because you created a piece of art on paper, the idea of a piece of art on paper, and people need to get together and realize that work of art. And everyone's different. There are also egos. There's also insecurity. So all those things are always going to be there. At the end of the day, you want to make sure you have a great attorney in the event that it just goes south. I go into every situation thinking it's going to go south, or this movie's not going to work, or marketing's going to totally screw up this movie. It's the only way. It's the only way that I can walk in a situation and have at least a plan B. So, assume that you'll have a fallout with somebody within your crew. Assume that, and just plan ahead. And maybe because you're planning ahead, you don't have that fallout. But it's deeply personal to make art, and so you're deeply invested. It's hard not to take it personally. So, yeah, this is every day for me. I'm part therapist, So, this is, you'll be dealing with this for a very long time. And it only gets to be even more complicated as you matriculate. But that's the fun part of the business. Shireen took her 11 months to make her movie. She was in prep, and then October 7th happened, and she had to leave the country. It took her 11 months to shoot the movie, to start from scratch. So always assume, crazy things will happen.
I'd also say from a legal point, you need to empower yourself with knowledge. If there are things you don't understand, ChatGPT is an amazing tool. It may not always be right, but most of the time it is. But really, if you are naive about things, you need to learn how to educate yourself, because other people can sniff that out and they will use it against you. And you don't have to know all the details, but don't be afraid of asking questions, and don't be afraid of educating yourself.
Can I just say one thing to the prior question in terms of a game plan and moving forward? I think, number one, I think this is a good starting point. And I think that we've been building as a community of filmmakers and creatives and artists and people on the business side. It's growing and it's getting there. And I think organically a lot of that success and where we can be in the future is happening. It's happening now. But not to add to what we've been saying, but it's about relationships and it's developing those relationships, keeping those relationships, being willing to sort of, point people in the right direction to other people in our community, in our in places where they can be helpful and impactful, because that's how we will be successful. Is, like I said before, knowing each other, working with each other, helping each other, and that sort of thing. And so I'll take this opportunity to say thank you to Sue and to MPAC and to the Doris Duke Foundation and everybody else for putting this.
We're going to do one more question. One last question, right?
We answered all the questions.
Yeah. Look, I wanted to make it so that they had a great opportunity to ask questions, because there's so many incredibly talented and smart people in this room. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, MPAC. Thank you, Doris Duke, for helping us.
Thank you, Sue. I never do these. I've only done them once, but Sue called, and I was like, all right, I'm going to put the...